Welcome back to the In the Lead Show. My name is Jennifer Tsang, and you're listening to episode number 31. In today's episode, I talked to Andy McDowell about how to find the win-win. Andy is an engineer by trade and a creative by nature. He spent 22 years with the Boeing company, where he always felt more like a life coach than a boss. In 2002, he began his journey into entrepreneurship and within a corporation when he was asked to develop an aerospace design consulting business from scratch that would serve the global government market. Andy has a bachelor's degree from Georgia Tech in electrical engineering and a master's degree in computer information systems from Georgia State. Naturally, his aviation work took him around the world and enabled him to work on high-profile projects, such as preparing the Beijing and Sochi airports for their respective Olympic Games. Andy would love to have a conversation with you about how we might be able to use his strategic skills developed from his years with the Boeing company to generate your value in your personal and professional life. He has a keen sense for applying business concepts into life coaching and life coaching concepts into business. In today's conversation, we do kind of span the gamut of, how to incorporate business concepts as well as life concepts into how you can approach finding that win-win, because in every aspect of our life, it is so important that we find that common ground so that we can make progress and reduce some of the friction and maybe some of the issues that we see that come up in the workplace and within our own relationships. Like, can we take that step back? And that's where the In the Lead podcast, I think, blends nicely with this topic, is because I'm always talking about how do we develop ways to take that step back and develop a deeper sense of self so that we can help manage, regulate, govern ourselves in a better way so that we can show up in a better way in conversations, in relationships. And this was a great conversation with Andy, and I'm really excited for you guys to hear it. So welcome to the show. Thank you for listening to the In the Lead Show. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and check out the In the Lead newsletter. Every week, I send out mindfulness and leadership tips to help you become the best leader of you. See the show notes for a link to subscribe to the newsletter, or go to www.intheleadshow.com and subscribe there. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the In the Lead Show. My name is Jennifer Tsang, and I'm here today with Andrew McDowell, who is a life, leadership, and small business coach, to talk about the importance of the win-win. Welcome to the show.
Great to be here with you, Jennifer, and I appreciate the invite.
Yeah. So before we get started into the importance of finding the win-win in, situations or everyday life and business, I would love to know a little bit more about you. So who is Andrew?
So obviously an entrepreneur who's had a unique journey from the perspective of, I started off as an employee of an entrepreneur. Then that company got bought by a major corporation. I got to become an entrepreneur within a corporation, to now an entrepreneur standing by myself, so to speak, in my own business. So I've seen a lot of the different facets, if you will, or different forms of which entrepreneurship can occur. And I think because of that, can bring a unique or somewhat unique viewpoint or experience to a client. Awesome. From a coaching perspective.
Yeah, that's awesome. And before we started recording today, we were talking about the importance of self and how that is such an important component that oftentimes gets overlooked, especially in coaching or in a lot of parts in life. We just want to kind of get to the end goal. Like, what are we trying to fix? Problem are we trying to solve? But we don't really often take the time to really look at that self. So when you're talking about the win-win, what part of self do you see in that?
Well, two things. One is, what do I need from a business perspective out of a teammate? Whether it be within a conversation or by their performance or what activities they've been hired to do from that perspective, but also what do I need for myself as a human being, as a leader, in whatever type of engagement I have with the person I'm talking to or engaging with. So there's a leader hat as a leader of the business, and then there's also a personal hat as a leader perspective to understand, am I looking for increase in trust? Am I looking for increase in credibility? Am I looking for vulnerability or transparency out of the person that's on the other side of the table from me, so to speak? That's what I need, but at the same time, I can be empathetic and understanding to understand what the person on the other side of the table needs. A
Yeah.
lot of which is probably the same as I.
Yeah. Or it couldn't be. I mean, I see that a lot. And it sounds like what you're talking about is projection. And what I've noticed, at least it's true for me, and I've seen with clients that I've worked with, is that we're often kind of projecting out our needs onto others. So
Mm-hmm.
it may not be actually what is needed in the moment for that win-win, or it might not even be what's needed for the other person. It's really just my own kind of internal need, whatever that is, whether it's trust or, you mentioned transparency, safety,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that is that I need right now. I'm constantly kind of projecting that out to other people and in seeking that in return, because there's something internally that's either, wounded or, damaged, or we're seeking something. It isn't always what's necessarily needed for that win-win to occur, or for that win-win for the other side, for the other person.
Well, generally, when you're trying to project something, you're trying to gain some control over the situation, right? You're looking
Mhm.
for a specific outcome, and you're doing what you think you can do or control from your perspective to make sure you get that outcome. Um, and that's why I'm just a big proponent of introspection of leaders and making sure you're not projecting. If you are projecting, it's projecting a sense of love and care and empathy and so forth, as opposed to you've got pains or hurts or traumas that you've had in your life, and therefore you need a sense of control. You have a sense of fear. You might be triggered in the conversation and so forth, and now all of a sudden you're projecting those onto the other person or in the conversation in an inappropriate way, in an effort to get a desired outcome, as opposed to truly finding that win-win.
Yeah. And what does that win-win look like to you? I know you mentioned you've worked inside of a big corporation before, you've been an entrepreneur. Like, in all of your experiences, like, how would you describe or define what a win-win actually is?
Well, it's different for every business and for every person, right? So, do you understand what motivates the person on the other side? Do you understand what their life objectives or their career objectives are? Have you had those type of conversations so you know what the win looks like for the person on the other side? If you can't picture that in your head, then you have a hard time visualizing how the conversation is going to go, or what a win-win looks like. I mean, that's why, I decided early on in my career that I would treat myself more like a life coach as opposed to a boss. How we sort of have the connotation of what boss is from that perspective. It's full of authority, um, accountability, responsibility, and so forth. And that's why I get paid what I get paid. And therefore, my win is only on that side. And it really doesn't matter what happens on the other side, as long as you're helping me to be the boss from that perspective. Or when you have a new teammate that comes on early on in your first conversations, are you truly understanding, or even in the interview process, what are their career aspirations? What value from their skills and talents do they bring to the table? And there's all of that in your mind as you're having a conversation, and truly can get a win-win for both of you.
Yeah.
Or is
And
it
a
going to be
win,
a win-lose if you start projecting fears and don't understand those things about the individuals that's on the other side of the table?
yeah. And, a win to me also, it feels almost like a moving target. It's interesting to me when somebody describes a win in air quotes, like, what does that really mean to me? Because even, and I'll use my sports analogies because I love sports, but even when I was playing sports and we would win a game, like there's still another game, right? And even if the objective or the goal for the team or myself was, let's win it all, let's win the championship, you still have to reset every year, every game.
Mm-hmm.
So the wins to me feel like they're almost kind of this moving target, or it almost feels more fluid where it's not necessarily always a fixed thing, but it's, for me, it almost feels like it's almost more like a mindset. It's like you said, what I heard you saying was curiosity is a skill in when you're trying to create those win-win kind of scenarios. It also feels like balance. It feels like when we're in that zone of that win-win, you're winning, I'm winning, we're in balance and we're in sync, and it's not imbalance because I'm not projecting, right? Or I'm not trying to coerce you or force you to have an opinion or whatever I'm trying to do. It feels like there's this partnership and there's this balance that's there just naturally when you're trying to create that win-win. And for me, it feels rooted in a mindset.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would also say there's different layers, right? So
Mhm.
going back to your sports analogy, there's a win for an individual. I played well, I scored some goals, or I got some home runs, whatever the sport may be. I contributed to the team. There's the team wins. Did the team win or did the team lose? That's at the very surface level, but you can go layers down underneath that to say, did the team play well together? Or was it all one person that scored all the goals and they did all the work and the team just sort of stood around,
Mhm.
so to speak? How well did they function together? Um, Obviously, there's no such thing as a perfect game, so mistakes were made. You get a win out of the mistakes if you learned a lesson and have some growth or improvement, so that you make less amount of mistakes or no mistakes at all at the next game or the next season, depending on the time frame or the scope that you're looking at. So it's there's a little bit more complexity to it than just the win-loss column from
Yeah.
that perspective. And are you being, like you said, the mindset, are you being mindful that it is complex in many layers and you're looking at all aspects of this, as opposed to just a straight, we do what it takes to win
Yeah. But
kind of aspect?
I had someone on the show recently who played soccer in college, and he was talking about how it didn't really matter. Like when you're getting scouted in high school, if you were a really good player, if your team is terrible and you guys aren't working well together, and like, let's say you're like a ball hog and you just want to score all the goals,
Mm-hmm.
the scouts aren't going to be looking at you, right? Because they want to see not only what are your skills, what are what are the natural things that you bring to the table and what can you do, but how do you bring other people together? Like, because especially in team sports and in any organization, any business, that's the name of the game. Like, it doesn't matter if you have 10 LeBron Jameses on your team. If they can't all work together well, you're never going to win. Like, that's just a truth. And I think you're right. It is a layered approach and it's not simple. That's why I'm saying it almost feels like it's fluid. It's constantly moving and changing because there is that together piece, because it's not a straight, like if it were just me and I could just control me, I could probably do more with, you know, helping me get towards those goals or making those changes. But when you're dealing with multiple people, different backgrounds, personalities, experiences, I mean, it can be really challenging to find that win-win, especially if it's a really triggering situation. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, let's say you're in the workplace and you're on a team where there's someone who you just don't get along with and you can't find that common ground. You can't find that win-win. Like, how are we both going to be successful here? What are some things do you think that get in people's way from being able to kind of transcend that or be able to bring that other person together to the table to create it?
Well, part of his one of the words you used was success. So, how do you define success for your team, for the individual, for the leader, for the company, or the sports team, or whatever? And are you having conversations around that? Is it you're working a major project, certain revenue goals, expense goals, and is success just the fact you completed the project, you completed it on time, and came in under budget or at budget, and we made the profit that we were shooting for? Is that the sole definition of success? Or are there other things involved, like, well, it's the first time we used a new technology in this project, and now one of our goals and to be successful in this is to learn and understand about the new technology, try our best to apply it to the project and get results for the customer. But even if we fall a little bit short of that, if we gain a lot of experience using this new technology, that's a huge success for us. So for me, a lot of it is being, once again, open, transparent, and having a conversation with the whole team involved as to this is what success looks like for us, and it's not just about money. Does everybody feel like they contributed to it? Do we know everybody's roles that are in it? We're using the new technology. Are we gaining experience that we feel like we can then build upon in other projects and get more and more expertise with it? And therefore, it takes us less time to use this technology in the project. To me, that's what success in the success, if you will, is having that conversation up front and having alignment and agreement amongst everybody involved. This is what success looks like, and this is what we're shooting for.
Yeah. Feels like oftentimes what I see too in organizations is an element of vulnerability that I think some people are afraid of, because in order to get that alignment, sometimes you're going to have to deal with people who don't agree, or people who have really strong personalities, or people who are having a reaction because maybe it's referencing some trauma or something they had when they were a child. I mean, you never know. And I think having the courage and vulnerability, I feel like is a really important component that a lot of times I think we kind of gloss over, because it can be uncomfortable for some people to lean into that, especially if it's really like if emotions are high and, people are having really strong reservations or reactions. It's about having the courage to really be vulnerable and be in that discomfort for a little bit, because getting to that alignment sometimes isn't easy, right? Like that would be easy if we could all just go, oh, here, this is what we're doing. This is where we're going. And now you know what you're going to do. And we just go off and have la-di-di until we get there. And then it's done. Like, at least from my experience working in big company, that's not how it always goes. That's how we want it to go. But that element of vulnerability and that courage piece, I think, is a big component that we miss a lot.
I would totally agree with you. It's hard work.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to be vulnerable, admit either mistakes or don't quite have the expertise in that particular area, or I made a mistake. I shouldn't have. I know better, but having a bad day and I made a mistake or whatever, from that perspective, and be vulnerable one-on-one with your leader, but also with the rest of the team. To say, be vulnerable and say, hey, I feel like I let you guys down. I didn't do as good a job as I expected for myself in this, and I feel like I let you down. Just want to let you know that. I learned a valuable lesson from it and going to do better next time. From that perspective, to have that courage and vulnerability and say things like that just strengthens the team, strengthens the trust amongst the team. They know that you're in it to win it. That you're present, if you will, within the project per se. And even though mistakes were made, in the long run, you're going to have a much more successful team in the end by being able to be vulnerable, have that emotional safety, if you will, amongst the team and one-on-one with your leader, which to me is a huge item that the leader should be bringing to the team, is a creation of a culture and emotional safety to have those type of conversations. It's hard work, but it's worth it in the end. And the question is, are you willing as a leader, and is your team willing to have that kind of culture, environment, and those kinds of conversations?
Yeah. Yeah, Andy, I love how you put that, because I've seen that a lot, because and I've thought about this working in a really large organization before. I've thought, okay, so every year we have new goals and new,
Mm-hmm.
kind of vision for the organization. And we spent the last year, I mean, just really grinding through everything just to get that done. And now you're telling us today, oh, well, now we have a new goal. This is our
Mm-hmm.
new vision for this year. And I thought, wow, we just spent all that time over the last year, like resolving conflicts, burnout, like
Fighting
all the
fires.
things, fighting fires left and right. And now we have a new goal. And I thought, what would happen if I just wasn't as like attached to whatever that end goal is? Like, would I have had a more peaceful experience for myself, not getting so stressed, not getting burned out, not being so like crazy? Because I've actually been in situations where like I was so intense and so stressed about a situation that it actually started affecting me, my health. And I was like, that is not. So it almost sounds like to me, instead of hyper focusing always on the end result, it's also about those little moments you were talking about, right? Having the courage to have those conversations, being vulnerable, acknowledging and really building that culture, because no matter where that next win we're looking for comes from, it's going to be rooted in that. It's going to be rooted in that culture and how healthy your people are, your organization, your just all of it is what's going to really fuel you to that next win or whatever that next goal is. And I think it can be a great foundation for creating more of those win-win experiences where we feel we're in balance and we're all healthy and thriving.
And are you, after a project, having post-project reviews
Mm-hmm.
and conversations? What went well? What didn't go well? And you're allowing input from every team member. Sally, what your opinion? What did things go well? What didn't go well? Okay, thank you, Sally. John, what did you think went well? What didn't go well? If from an overall team perspective and from your role perspective in the team. And are you hearing any common themes in that discussion around the table? Those are obviously the low-hanging fruit you can go after to try and alleviate those concerns going into the next project, particularly if a lot of people put a lot of hard work and a lot of stress and everything into it. If that's the case, are you having a conversation in that post-project review to understand why was there a lot of stress? Bad expectations, not enough budget. I mean, it could probably a list of 10 different things that cause stress in the project. And are you throwing those on the table in the discussion and say, we got to do it better next time? So how could we change our processes? How can we change our roles? How can we change our team members? What are the things that we could do to reduce or totally eliminate that in the next project? And in doing so, you create a culture of continuous improvement. Each project is not an end all to end all. It's about the journey of the team. And how can we have a culture of continuous improvement? Keep collecting those data points, if you will, after the end of a project so we can change our environment, our culture, our processes, our people, our training, anything of that nature that's going to then allow us to do it better, hopefully perfect, but if you can't have perfection, then something that was better than the last project, and see this as a journey of, a trajectory of continuous improvement.
Yeah, I know we're talking about kind of in the business sense and around projects, but I feel like that is also applicable to life in general, right? I mean, just having, again, that mindset, right? To continuously
Absolutely.
improve. And I always say, and I don't know how you feel about this, Andy, but I always tell people, look, like, especially in really high stress situations, like at work, if you have to make really big decisions or bring a big team together, you're having a lot of problems, practice when it doesn't count. So for instance, are there things in your life that you want to improve? Look for opportunities just in your everyday life, out walking your dog, out, at the store, your whatever it is that you want to work on, start practicing then so that when you get into those moments where there's a lot of stress and you got to be on, you can shift into that more naturally instead of waiting. I find like there's a lot of leaders that I've worked with who say like, oh, well, that's not natural to me. I'm like, okay, well, if it's not natural right now, what are some things you can start doing to make it become more natural? Because it's only not unnatural because you're not used to doing it. So it's just like basketball, shooting, spend so many hours in the gym shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting. And then you were practicing and preparing yourself for when it counted in the game. So it's also, I think, I want to shift into, I think, building skills around this, but I feel like it's something that, you have to constantly, look at, improve, learn from, tweak. Like, it's not a like light switch. Hey, now we're going to be this new team and I'm going to be this new person. Find little moments that you can practice every day and prepare yourself for when you're then in those moments that it really matters.
So a key ingredient to that particular piece is, once again, being introspective and know the things that you either consider a weakness for yourself or not as strong as you'd like it to be. You could be fairly strong in something, but you want it to be even stronger. And so, what I help my clients do, and it's a big part of my platform, is the fact that the overlap between life and business is very strong. So you can use business strategic tools in developing a life strategy for yourself, of which anything that you're weak in or just sort of strong in, you want to strengthen. What's a program that you could put together for yourself to go make it stronger in those little moments? Because it's always in the forefront of your brain, because it's part of your life strategy. And you're going to grab hold, if you will, of every opportunity, no matter how big or small, to work on that.
Yeah.
So maybe vulnerability is a problem for you. So, maybe you used to walk up to a friend, they go, "How's your day going?" You go, "Fine." Okay, well, let's try being a little bit more vulnerable in that. Okay, how's your day going, Andy? Pretty good. I had a kind of a hard conversation with my father on the phone this morning over a particular issue, but for the most part, my day's pretty good. Yeah. Oh, okay. So day's pretty good, and you were vulnerable enough to say I had a difficult conversation with my father on the phone this morning for whatever the discussion was. It doesn't matter. But the fact that you sort of peel that onion back a little bit on part of your day, and this is just an easy example. It's an everyday kind of example, but it's even those small kinds of opportunities to be a little bit more in depth, if you will, in a simple dialogue like that, is a great chance to practice it and get comfortable with it before you really have to have a hard, vulnerable conversation, whether it be with a spouse or a boss or a loved one or whatever it may be. But once again, you got to understand that about yourself. You have to say, I want it to be different from myself, and I need to put a strategy together, simple or complex, doesn't matter. Depends on what you're willing to handle, in changing that and strengthening that muscle per se in your life.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is, actually, I have these 4 C's of leadership that I think about a lot. One of them is conscientiousness. So it's about being more mindful, noticing, understanding yourself. being
Empathetic.
curious, right? Being curious with yourself and with others. But then the other component is commitment. Like, how committed are you to this? Is
Hmm.
it something, are you just gonna do once and then expect a change? So really developing that commitment and really having a very strong mindset towards this is something I'm going to focus on every day, but then you got to be consistent with it. It's not,
Hmm.
again, going back to my analogy with basketball, you have a bad game or you're not, you just go through these funks. I don't know if you played sports, but I remember going through these funks where it was like all of a sudden I just couldn't make a shot. And I'm like, I'm
Hmm.
doing everything the same. It just doesn't feel right. You Life kind of ebbs and flows that way, but the more you can be consistent, the more you can kind of ride those waves a little bit easier so that when you're going through those, you're not in these like giant waves that are like 10 feet tall and you're doing really well and then crashing. You want to stay kind of like able to float on the surface a bit to be able to kind of endure life's just natural way of kind of nudging you along the way and not and kind of keeping you off balance. How can you kind of remain a little bit more consistent that way? So I love what you were saying. Again, it goes back to me. I hear just it starts with self and having um, some skills. So I'm curious, I want to know what you think as far as like, what are some skills that you think people can develop to create more of that win-win?
Grit, resilience, um, not needing to be perfect. I don't know, that's considered a skill, but it's as you were talking with your sports analogy, what came to mind in my own personal life. So I've been a singer since I was a teenager, and decided I wanted to expand my music abilities. So I made a commitment to myself. If I go buy a guitar, I'm going to commit 10 minutes a day, no matter how bad I sound. I'm going to have the grit and the resilience and so forth to keep playing it at least 10 minutes a day to improve my skills, much like you go on the basketball court and shoot 50 balls every day, um, to get used to the patterns or muscle memory or whatever the skill that's necessary for the sport or the instrument or whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, to get yourself to a point. And I was successful in that. I'm now a rhythm guitarist in a praise band at my church. um, I sounded awful in the very beginning, but what was important was the commitment, was the 10 minutes, and having realistic expectations that I know I'm going to sound awful in the beginning, but that's okay. It's a journey. It's a journey to learn the guitar. It's a journey to get very good and successful and have skills on the sports field. So, what are the important skills for that long journey? To me, it's grit, resilience, proper expectations, and a knowledge that it's a journey. And more than, in my opinion, more than half the fun of it is the journey itself.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
confidence that you get in yourself, the commitment, the pride, everything else that you achieve at when you are finally successful at it is what you're shooting for. But you gotta have the grit and resilience to know I'm not going to be perfect every day. I'm not going to sound that terrific, playing the guitar in the very beginning, and just keep going and enjoy the journey as you're going along.
Yeah. What I hear underpinning all of that too is that self-awareness piece you were talking about earlier, because a lot of times, at least what I found in my athletic career was that it's not always about fundamentals or like learning the actual like technique or the play or the whatever. A lot of times it's the things that you can't see, like things that are kind of happening beneath the surface. What is driving you to maybe not want to go into the gym that day, or what might be driving you from being distracted from being really focused on whatever you're trying to learn or perfect or whatever. It's, I think, just being really self-aware of, and understanding yourself, like what's happening, what's going on, where's that coming from, what might be driving that. Again, that curiosity, with that self-awareness, I think helps you build that resilience, helps you build, all those things you were talking about. Because if we're not aware, of what's going on in here, I don't know how we expect to be fully engaged or connected or aware of what's going on outside of us. So I think there's also that component, that self-awareness that we were talking about, that I think just scares a lot of people. And it's fascinating to me. Obviously, as coaches, we help people with that, but it's fascinating.
Yeah, that's why when I talk to a potential client and they say, yeah, I want to be an entrepreneur and a business owner. Oh, that's terrific. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you want to be that? Is it a joy and a passion that you enjoy, or do you have a lot of belief in a particular what's the word I'm looking for? A belief in a certain way the world should be that you want to change, that's driving you. What is driving you to want to do that? Because as somebody who's been in business for a number of years in different forms of entrepreneurship, it's not an easy journey. So you have to have the things that we just talked about, right? Grit, resilience, expectations, and so forth, because it's not an easy road, and you need those skills to get you through the bumps in the road in your journey to be an entrepreneur or a business owner or a leader of a corporation or whatever from that perspective. So I try to get to the root early, because if I ask some questions and you're not understanding those things, then we got a lot of work to do to get you to that point, or maybe you might want to consider doing something else because you just don't have the skills yet. So not to say you can't develop them, but you don't have the skills yet to be successful in what is a long, arduous journey.
Yeah. Like you said, it is a journey. And to me, it always feels like a lifelong journey. It's not, I think we're always constantly, I always say we're being invited to come back to take a look at these things that are tough. How can we create more win-wins, more of that balance, more of that congruence, maybe with others and with teams, and bring people together. I think we're always being almost tested or invited right back into, all right, let's see, you've got some new skills. How are you going to handle this situation? And I look at it like almost like it's testing me in some way. Like, all right, Jen, let's see where you're at now. Let's see where you're at. What skills maybe you still need to develop. What do you do really, really well? And just keep coming back to that and just keep really working with it. I find for me, someone who has a very strong inner critic, that helps framing it in that way, where it's not like oh, Jen, you did terrible and you're never going to be, good at this one thing. Like, try to find a way that works for you to help kind of build some more of that resilience, that grit, in a way that doesn't necessarily reinforce always, maybe bad habits that you have. Because I could see when you said grit, like for me, I could see that if I let it get out of balance or out of like too much, like it could reinforce some really negative thought patterns for me of, I'm not good enough. I'm never going to be good enough. Right. Like, oh, I just have to do this and force myself. Right. That's why for me, it just feels like it always comes back to that self-awareness piece and just being really mindful of your own thoughts, your triggers, where you're going, what's fueling all of that. Yeah.
That's why for me, it always comes back to mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And to one of my favorite conversations in the world I love to do with people over a glass of wine is, why are you here?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you a human being on this earth, do you think?
Wow.
Are you here to grow? Are you a biological animal that's just here to survive and procreate? Yeah. Or is it something much more beyond that? Where are you on that spectrum, if you will? Because that's going to have a major input, and this is where I try to get with clients too, is it's going to have a major input into your life journey, your life strategy, and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a great question. Why are you here? Because I mean, that can be different for everybody. And
Hmm.
I think really understanding that, I think is a
There's
good
only a right
foundation.
answer for you. The answer that Jennifer has compared to the answer that Andy has is different. We're two very different, unique individuals. So there's not,
Yeah.
it's not to say, here, pay me $100 and I'll give you the answer to why you're here.
Yeah.
It's more of just planting a seed and having somebody always thinking and asking that about themselves as they go through their life journey.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that. I might steal that question next time I'm sitting down with someone over a glass
be
of
my
wine. I'm say,
be
why
my
are you
guest.
here? What?
Why are
Yeah.
you
Cause I mean,
here?
it's fascinating. I mean, it's got me thinking a lot just
And we
right
go back
now.
to the early part of our conversation about the layers, right? You want to talk about layers
Mhm.
of success. You can have layers of that question, right? So, why am I here on this earth? Is the big 100,000 foot level we used to say in the aviation question, and you can bring it down the altitude, so to speak, of it down to, well, why are you in San Jose, California? Why am I in Atlanta, Georgia? Why are you at this restaurant tonight?
Mhm. Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, I think I think it's important to start. I always call it my North Star. It's like, yeah, understanding what drives me and what kind of that 100,000 foot view is and where I want to go. But then, yeah, as you get further down, kind of in more nuance, you can understand in this moment, what do I want to do? Or why am I here? Or
Mm-hmm.
what can I do differently? Or what skill do I want to develop? But it always comes back for me, at least getting back down to that grounded level of, okay, what can I do right now? Um, that's something that I know helps me a lot because I can get very kind of swept away in the 100,000 foot view of, yeah, I would really, I want to make an impact on the world and I want to
Mm-hmm.
heal and I want to do all these things. And then I go, I don't know what any of that means. So it's helpful for me to get really rooted and kind of grounded in what am I going to do in this moment that's aligned to that 100,000 foot view. Um,
That's a why is one of my favorite words in the English language.
yeah.
Why? Because
Why? Yeah.
as a leader, you're not going to get engagement um, and have influence with your team unless you're answering the question why all the time. The
Mm-hmm.
company just came out with a new policy, or here's our 2023 strategy for the year. Okay,
Yeah.
why?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's
If
important.
you can get your team members to see the reasons why we're doing the strategy and see how they fit into the strategy, both overall for your team and they as individuals, you'll get a ton of engagement.
That's creating a win-win right there, right?
That's
I
just
mean,
creating the win-win right there.
yeah,
So for a leader, the word why is extremely important, both
helping.
outwardly looking to your team and so forth, but also looking inside yourself to say, well, why am I a leader?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you don't have to have a title to be a leader. So if you're an influential leader within the company without necessarily having a big title behind it, well, why are you that way? And why are you doing that?
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. I love kind of contemplating that why. And that's one part of my reflection practice often is kind of really tuning into that why and making sure to come back to that as often as I can. Because again, with that alignment for me, it helps me stay on track too. And I go, okay, why am I doing this? Like, what's what's the end goal? What can I do right now? Where do I hope to be? A question I like to ask myself is in 3 years, if I look back on this decision or this choice or whatever it is, am I going to regret it? Is it going to be something that I really regret doing or not doing?
Mhm.
And having those practices just to really be able to kind of have the view, but keep yourself really grounded in that why, what you're going to do in this moment. And then just sometimes it's about just having the courage to take that next step too. We can get caught up. I can get caught up for sure. It's one of my parts of myself that I've developed where I can get really bogged down in the why. Like I could ask why forever. And it drives my
Mhm.
therapist crazy. She's like, Jennifer, you don't always need to know why. So again, I think it's also about, at least for me, from my standpoint, is also finding a way to really ground yourself and just having kind of a line of sight on that why and really making that clear, but then doing some of the things every day to just kind of start moving you towards and in alignment with that why. Very powerful. I think it helps create that win-win too with others, and feels there's an authenticity to that as well, that I think is a great skill set for any leader to have, especially creating a win-win.
Mm-hmm.
We're coming up towards the end of the show, so I wanted to just leave with a thought from you. So if there's a listener out there listening going, wow, that's really great, talked about a lot of stuff, I want to create more win-wins, what is like the first thing you would recommend somebody do to start creating more of those win-wins?
Well, first of all, win-win denotes that you're not the only player in it. You know, if you're in the arena, somebody else is in the arena. So it goes back to our earlier part of our conversation, right? About understanding the definition of success, what kind of goals, aspirations the other person has. You know, as a leader, here's a good thought. It just came to mind. So oftentimes, if I had people coming to visit my team in my office, you know, and I was in a remote office within Boeing, there weren't a lot of Boeing people in the building. And I would often invite people to come visit with my team and see where we could find the win-wins. So we would all gather around the table and sit down and grab our cups of coffee or whatever. And the first question I would ask, looking at the leader on the other side of the table of the team, is to say, you know, first of all, thanking them for coming and spending time with myself and my team. I would ask the question, what does success look like for you today? And understand what it is from their side. I'd already have a sense, and I would state what it was on our side. And then all of a sudden you have a teammate on the other side that understands what success looks on each side. And then you have the opportunity to put together a very quick, simple strategy for the day to try and achieve the win-win for each other. But if you don't ask a question, then you're making assumptions, or you don't care, and it's just all about you and your team and getting out of it what you want. So once again, it's a why, it's a mindset, and so forth. As you're walking in, are you trying to find the win-win for each, and therefore build trust and credibility and an emotionally safe environment and a great culture of the day, or culture between the two teams if you're going to be working together with each other. But it all starts with that just simple question: what does success look like for you today?
I love that. And it actually got my mind really spinning, because I was thinking and reflecting on how many times we've had offsites, you know, back when we all got together. We've had team meetings, we've had all team projects that we would meet in person for. And how many times, did we just kind of instruct people, well, this is what we're going to get out of today. And could we have really taken a moment to ask people, well, what are your goals for today? What's most important to you? I think that's a really powerful tool.
You also have to be prepared for the fact that they state this grandiose statement, and it sounds like we're only here for 8 hours, and it sounds like it might take us all week to get it. And then you have to get into a negotiation conversation to try and get something that's both parties can agree on, realistic in an 8-hour work day. So it may take a little bit of work to sort of finish that conversation, but at the end, you're all sort of aligned and gathered around, if you will, a common enemy, so to speak, which is conquering the day to get to the win-win. And all of a sudden you've got a teamwork environment around the table to go after it, because you've got agreement as to what success looks like.
It's fantastic. I love that. I've learned so much from you today, just in our short conversation. I have, why are you here? Which I'm telling you, the next time I have like drinks with somebody, I'm going to ask them that. And I mean, I love even I'm going to take that back to my leader and propose that, if we're having meetings, can we start with what does success look like for you today?
Yeah,
I love that question.
I had a conversation that stands out with a gentleman in his team in another part of Boeing that I really had some difficulties with, because we are both trying to get the governments of the world to incorporate a new GPS-based technology. And I finally got an agreement to come visit with my team, look at what we do and so forth, and try and figure out ways that we can work together. And they had some very aha moments from the conversation of difficulties and struggles internal within Boeing that we've been asking for in terms of resources and so forth to get this done. It was a huge win-win for me. But I started with that question.
Yeah.
And got a tremendous win-win out of it. And all of a sudden we became teammates and really started working together to get some penetration in the world with this new technology. But prior to that, we were almost internal competitors.
Yeah.
From that perspective. So I
And
continue to use that question.
Think about how detrimental that would also be to the business, though. I see that a lot too, where there's a lot of internal competition, a lot of internal
You're
silos,
competing
and
for resources and pride and ego and
constantly
popularity in the industry. Oh, there was so much, so much involved in that. Can't tell you, my boss and I went to Seattle so many times trying to conquer that thing, and I finally was able to crack that nut, so to speak, by getting the right people in the room and just asking that question and start peeling the onion layers back from that perspective, that they made all kinds of assumptions that were untrue, and we were able to uncover those and really get some momentum behind us at that point. But it goes back to everything we talked about in this conversation about trust and vulnerability and openness, and what does success look like, and looking for the win-win. So to take this 30-45 minutes, I don't know how much time we spent in this conversation, but to put a big bow on it, so to speak, at the end here, that example has just about everything we've talked about in this conversation wrapped in it.
Yeah, no, it was a very powerful example. And I'm telling you, I'm going to take that into my organization and propose some ideas around it, because I love that idea.
Well, feel free to plagiarize it. Plagiarize the hell out of
it. Thank you.
I'm just glad I've generated some value in your day and hopefully in your team.
Yeah.
In just 30 minutes. That's what I'm here for.
No, that's awesome. I love it. So to wrap things up, and thank you for your time today, I wanted to ask you a few of my questions that I do at the end, just to get to know you a little bit more. And the first question is, what is your favorite book on your bookshelf?
So your listening audience might have been able to decipher this from our conversation, but I'm a huge Simon Sinek fan. So his big bestseller, on the Book of Why is my all-time favorite, just because I've had those feelings and thoughts in my career, so to speak. And then here's a book that finally put everything I believed in and thought about through my career in one simple book. And I really wish I had written it.
Right.
But I was glad at least somebody in this world had written it, and it's gaining some popularity and momentum because it's such a powerful book.
Yeah. Our whole leadership team has read that. Yeah. It's a good book. Last question is, tell us about a person that has impacted you, and how have they impacted your life?
The one I talk about the most was an executive coach. Her name's Raina Bach, out of Denver. Great executive coach. I was fortunate enough that Boeing offered it to the ranks of the very top of middle management and the bottom of the executive level, where I was sitting, sort of mid-career. She's based in Denver. I was based in Atlanta, but I went to Denver 6-7 times a year. So I'd say 80, 90% of my trips I made to Denver in the year, we get together over breakfast at it was a waffle place. I can't remember the name of it, but she's the one that really peeled the onion layer back and saw that I sort of had a victim slash, what's the term they use? It's just a given mindset that the world's going to do what the world's going to do to me.
Mm.
Prior to that, I had a journey of self-esteem problems through high school and college that affected my first marriage. And, talking about grit and everything else and doing the hard stuff, I went into therapy, said, this is not the life I want for myself. And I'm willing to do the hard work to get the change done. And I did. But at that point, I wouldn't say I was 100% healed, maybe 75 or so. And she helped close that gap to 100% for me. The very last thing that I had to do, which was truly own my life, to be the CEO of my life and say, you're the only one that's going to do it. You can ask for a supporting cast. You can ask for help. You can ask for fans to be in your arena.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to do the work yourself.
Yeah.
And that set the course and part of why I wanted to be a coach was to pay it forward from what was done for me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I often say that we have too many thought leaders. We have too many gurus out there. We need more healers, those people that can come into our lives to help us bridge that gap and to help us resolve whatever it is we need to resolve or to see something new in a different way. That's beautiful that you're able to have that experience. And
it does take some curiosity. I mean, I had to do some curiosity about who I am, answer that question of why are you here? And I don't care what, if you will, structure system you look at, whether it be a religious structure or astrology, human design. I mean, there's just a number of different structures out there that try to describe life and personality and the why of your life and everything. And every time I was curious and went and studied a different one about myself, I came out with the same answer, that I'm sort of an old soul in this world that is here to heal.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Like I said, I feel like we need more of that and more healers out there doing work to help heal people. And also I believe heal organizations. I feel like what I see a lot in the workplace is just that unhealed kind of traumas and reinforced negative thought patterns, behaviors. Like, how can we all contribute a little bit to that healing? So I thank you for the work that you do with people to help them on that journey. And it was such a pleasure today, Andy, getting to know you and talking about the win-win and some things we can do to help maybe create more healers out in the world so that, it makes it just a better place. Before we go, where can people contact you? How can they find you out on the web?
Well, the best place is my website, www.generateyourvalue.com. You can find out more about me, access to my podcast, which is under the same name as my company name. I do with a co-host and so forth. I'm on all the major social platforms, but generateyourvalue.com is the best place to start.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure to include that in the show notes as well so that people can connect with you if they're interested in learning more or just connecting with you in general. So I appreciate your time, Andy, and thank you so much for coming on the show today.
And I greatly appreciate your time, your invitation, and keep generating your value as well.